All right, man.
Oh,
Whoa,
okay.
look at that.
Let me just get the background off.
That
Here's
looks
the
like a psychedelic trip background. Now I see an egg.
Yeah, that's a Twitter reg. That's a Twitter reg NFT from 2014.
Wow.
Let me see here. Can we get this one? It's an X copy. Let's just get none.
All right, cool. First of all, where are you?
I'm in New York City.
Okay, cool. Andrew, we are good friends. So this is going to be both fun and also very educational because most of us, in fact, everyone on this call is a DeFi nerd, including myself. And so a deep tech project, which I would classify Nillion as, is, and learning about it's going to be extremely educational. So I think before we start, it could be really interesting to talk about health for a second, because we're both obsessed with it. I see you're drinking something weird, could
Oh
be
no,
water.
this is Sistanch tea, and
Stanch tea. Okay.
this right next to me is our. Oh, you can't see it because let me just take it, this blur. It's Inarico, which,
Yep.
as you know, came from our mentor. I mean, all around me is just health stuff. I mean, Lily's truth approved chocolates. It's everywhere. I got my pumpkin seed oil there.
So you're you have infinite resources, and you've been obsessed about health and fitness for a while. And I think it'd be interesting for you to share, like, what do you think is a good 80-20 for, because like everyone here works a lot. They're like, crypto is insane. It could consume you, as you know. It can be all consuming. And especially when we're in a bull market or a super cycle, things just get crazy. So what do you think is like a good 80-20 for people?
Firstly, something interesting about resources being infinite. I actually realized the other day that Jeff Bezos can only buy, I think, something like half or three-quarters of Manhattan with his net worth. So even the richest man in the world doesn't have unlimited resources, which was an interesting thought experiment for me, as you know, we go on this path to continually make money and where it kind of ends. In terms of how I deal with starting two companies now and having started many more, I think there are like pillars which I focus on. So the first and most important pillar is diet, and then sleep probably equal first, right? And really, it's about adopting the mentality or framework within that, within those categories, and there's probably an exercise is probably another one, for example, that allow me to optimize my life towards something that achieves the goal that I'm after. So, for example, if the goal that I'm after is to create companies and is to do really well by way of economics, then it'll be optimizing for my mind. If it's to do with other things, then if it was weightlifting, it would be a different diet. If it was enjoyment, perhaps it would be a different diet as well, or short-term enjoyment, long-term enjoyment. And as I delve more into the world of biohacking, I realized that there are certain things which people can choose to do, which optimize different parts of their wellness. So everything from sexual wellness to hair growth to skin to et cetera. So but in general, the pillars are super important. As I said, diet and sleep. So I try and keep a normal rhythm when it comes to sleep. I have several sleep stacks that I use if I have the problem of waking up and not being able to go back to sleep. So I have several sleep stacks that I use to get back to sleep if I need to. But oftentimes I try and just keep a calm mind and make sure that I am able to do it without chemicals or with natural means.
I really like the idea of different stacks based on what mode you're in. And I think now, arguably, I mean, you're running multiple projects. You're in hardcore build mode. And so I'm excited to dive into that. Can you just share like how you got here, how you got to Nillion, and your professional background for everyone who hasn't caught up on that and doesn't know who you are yet?
Sure, sure. So Nillion, the first thing is I started Hedera Hashgraph and the reserve protocols, but even before then, so I guess it's worth starting from when I was a lawyer first, because the thing is, you got to go. I think that the strength was that I started within the matrix of law, banking, because I was a banker for a year before I was a lawyer, and then I moved on after that to doing things which were very unconventional. So the first was internet marketing in 2007, and I think the thing to notice there is that it was my first breakaway from convention and my first real focus on being contrarian, really, right? So my professional background starts very, very, very standard, very, consensus, if you like. And then internet marketing happened. All these kids were making money, and I was like, "What's going on here?" And then after internet marketing, blockchain happened in 2017. Well, I bought Bitcoin in 2011, but 2017, I started, Hedera and Reserve. Hedera in 2017, Reserve in 2019. And then, Nillion in 2021, say. But I think that the legal background and the banking background gave me sort of a way to understand professionalism, the way to understand the value of consensus, but the way to understand the real way to think about non-consensus decision making and projects and initiatives. And so that brings us to Nillion. I mean, when you think about Hedera Hashgraph, that was kind of a non-consensus way of looking at blockchain, because it was a non-blockchain that was focused on scalability. If you look at Reserve, it was, crypto was going up and down. It was a stability mechanism for cryptocurrencies. If you look at, Nillion, there are several what I call contrarian narratives that occur with Nillion, right? And they are taking public blockchains private, or rather, giving a public blockchain a private utility, consensus without computation, storing all your secrets online for people to see, which they just can't see it in the form that they need to see it in an unencryptionless way, and then having permissionless decentralized nodes that don't focus on a immutable ledger, but rather on verifiable computations. All these things are really interesting narratives, and you can see the pattern through where I've been, like from lawyer to internet marketer to blockchain very early, blockchain to non-blockchain now to not even, this is a verifiable compute network, not even a distributed ledger. It's always kind of pushing towards something that is non-consensus, right? Always. And this is why when I think about the successes I've had and the large successes, I really put it down to this sense that I have that something is right, which sometimes is wrong, right? But I have a sense that is right, but other people don't believe it's right yet. But it makes sense to me, and that's the most important thing, right? So
would you say that I mean, just to interrupt very quickly, this is the thing that I know that I think this is your biggest North Star, is betting on contrarian perspectives and narratives, and like understanding something that not everyone sees yet, and they may disagree with. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I would say so. There isn't one thing that has, because there are other things, right? My ability to execute, my ability to network, my ability to convince people to join part of a team, just sometimes like raw intelligence, the fact that I'm kind of obsessed with crypto, or I get obsessed with things very easy. Like there are multiple characteristics, but what I would say is that I can apply these characteristics to something like law and get good results. All right. I can apply them to something like widgets and get standard, like smaller results. But if I apply them to something that I believe is contrarian and right, that's where the results become truly exponential, right? To quote my friend Devin Finzer, who started OpenSea, he's like, look, I didn't know that that it was going to work out, that OpenSea was going to become really big. I just stuck through it, right? I just didn't give up, and I kind of believed in where the industry was going. So, he just had this firm belief, and I had the firm belief as well. I just didn't think that NFTs would pop as soon as 2021, right? But my point is that I think that it is that you need all these other skills to be able to take advantage of any opportunity, right? And I do recognize something. I never told you this, David, but throughout my career, right, I started off in anti-risk environments, so banking and law. Then went to internet marketing, which is some risk, but it was not. Then went to blockchain. Now I'm at like, let's go, baby, right? Like let's try. But it's funny because I perceive it in my mind now, because I'm so like risk is like a brother to me. I understand it a lot better, but I have definitely become more and more risk on. I say now that I don't want to get involved with the project unless it can potentially change the world, and unless I see the contrarian narrative that I also believe. And when people ask me where it comes from, I think I grew up in the 80s and 90s in Australia. This is just after the abolition of the White Australia policy, and in a really rough part of Australia. So the consensus view of Australia and the tall poppy syndrome, et cetera, it was never, it always reinforced that the consensus is going to do me wrong, and I have to find something else, to do me right. And that's kind of, excuse me, that's kind of why I think I have this like really consensus view. I also think that, some of it happened because, there were just so many things, like work in banking, I hated banking. Work in law, I hated law. Be really like buy girls flowers, like that never worked for me. Like, all sorts of stuff that the consensus would tell me back when I was in Australia, right? That just didn't work for me, and it gave me a more contrarian narrative. That plus, that plus having the raw intelligence to be able to figure out, hey, this is actually a good narrative, and then and then one other weird thing that I have noticed is to align myself or to meet people who are very intelligent too, but live life outside the bounds of a regular cadence, right? We all know them, these like weird guys who are just ultra smart at something, right? Sometimes it's, it could be anything. You and I both know a couple of these people, and it's in those people and in listening and understanding and discarding what they say about topics that they have nothing to do with, and seeing the topics where they are very extraordinary at, that that lead to you coming across contrarian ideas and therefore outcomes.
That was Luna, right? You had a friend who disappeared basically for 6 months or a year, and he came out of the dark depths of his apartment or house, and he was like, dude, Luna, because of this, and this.
Oh
and
yeah,
you've surrounded yourself with these people.
Yeah,
and it's kind of like a truffle network you've set up.
Yes. So Luna was one. There are a couple of others that no, it was not Luna. It was Chainlink that he came up with. He was like, buy Chainlink, and man, I bought Chainlink in the ICO, sold at 8x, and then I thought I was a genius, and then it was at like 80 cents or something, and then he's like, hey, you should buy it again. And then, I bought it and then sold it at 4x, and now it's at like, 20 plus. Anyway, my point is that yeah, I align I like finding people who are weird but intelligent, you know, and so that's kind of what. Yes, so you're right. One was Luna, the other one was Chainlink. There've been several others, like,
Yeah.
you know, one was Ichi, which you just see like right now is just popped. Yeah, there are tons of them.
Okay. So
Oh,
we're here to
and
talk
one thing,
about,
in
oh, go
different
ahead.
on different parts of life as well. So we're talking about crypto here, but you know, in every single part of life, I found that the way to get extraordinary results is to find those outliers and have an open mind about how they approach problems.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so you're here to talk about Nillion, and we have so many other topics we could talk about. I wish you were here for 6 hours and not 90 minutes, but we'll perhaps do another one of these. In my simple brain, I understand Nillion to be almost like blockchain 2.0. And obviously the battle of layer ones was like the most lucrative narrative to understand in the last year. And we're still seeing that theory and narrative play out. But like, am I accurate in thinking of Nillion as like a better decentralized, trustless version of current blockchain 1.0?
No, not exactly, right? And let me tell you why. So when it comes down to what Nillion actually is, it's a set of permissionless nodes which can do arbitrary computations where the result of the computation is verifiably correct to a, you know, it could be Byzantine fault, but you sent me a question before on Telegram that algorithmic level can be set by the algorithm that you apply, right? So you because you're receiving all of the data back from the nodes, right? You basically can apply an algorithm which sets the fault tolerant level, right?
How is that different from current ledger nodes, for example?
Uh, Current ledger nodes typically run on like either a sort of a proof of work where a proof of work or a proof of stake or a way that the nodes have to communicate with each other, right? This isn't that. So, well, it's different because we're not solving for a ledger. We're solving for just a computation which can be verified. And the second thing is there is no communication between any of the nodes, right? The nodes receive the information and then they reconstruct the result locally in accordance to an algorithm. That algorithm has a fault tolerant level attached to it, right? So, but my point is that in an arbitrary compute network, you could feasibly have an immutable ledger if you really wanted to, right? We deliberately didn't do that or didn't want to do that. A couple of reasons. The first is that we solve for value, not order. It isn't, you know. So we are a network focused on value. We could put order in, but it isn't the current primary motive. And what we're trying to do is we're not trying to go up against layer ones. We're trying to enhance them, right? And that's really a strategic difference. So instead of, you know, I built Hedera and man, it was such a shit show trying to go up against the Ethereum community all the time. I would have much preferred if we're like, hey, we're going to help Ethereum in this way. P.S. There are other things the network does which are cool, different. So, you know, for example, Nillion has the information theoretic security. It has, you know, a non-encrypted property. It has this strange ability to run very efficient compute. So these are things where, you know, and private compute, right? These are things that we can offer to an existing layer one. And then we say, hey, P.S. there, because of these strange, you know, features, we can then create a whole new suite of decentralized use cases, you know? So that's how it's kind of different.
Can you just touch on some of those use cases? Because when I read them, I get extremely excited. Can you touch on some of those?
Sure. So there are the features of, say, providing privacy to other blockchains, pure computation functions, information theoretic security, which is a non-encrypted and in inverted commas unhackable, depending on how you define hackability. But where computing power can't unencrypt a specific file. These factors create really interesting and weird use cases. So, for example, a decentralized LastPass. It's funny because or one password, if most people store their private keys in a centralized way. So you're trying to protect a decentralized network using a centralized storage solution, right? In this case, what you could do is theoretically put your private key on the Nillion network. It never is constructed, right? All that's constructed is the signed transactions that go directly onto the blockchain or whatever blockchain you want when you actually require that to happen, right? That's an example. So a decentralized LastPass or 1Password, decentralized Fireblocks. I mean, Fireblocks is now the way that it's $1 billion company. It's the way that venture capitalists and large funds store their private keys, right? That's another example. Decentralized KYC and AML, because the network, by virtue of the fact that the information gets, your identity, for example, which is just a piece of data, gets transformed and then split into, or Horcruxed, I call it, like Voldemort, into the node network in an information theoretic secure way. It basically means that you can store your identity, store in inverted commas, your identity nowhere, in the Nillion network. That's what Nillion means, is a whole lot of nothing. So, in the Nillion network, where it's information theoretic secure and thus GDPR compliant as well, and then bring it back whenever you want. So, or give it to someone else, or verify to someone else, or in its final form, allow that person to be able to verify that you are who you say you are without even accessing the identity on the network, right? You can just compare. You can ask for a compare function without ever sending the actual information to the other person. These are some ideas, some instances of use cases that are quite specific to Nillion. However, there are other use cases. So a general purpose compute network, which has inbuilt privacy and verification of compute, could act as a secure enclave, a decentralized secure enclave for blockchains. So, Ethereum needs to send a private computation somewhere. That computation theoretically could be sent to the Nillion network. The computation could be run in a decentralized way, as opposed to using, an Intel SGX chip or something, and then sent back to the Nillion network. Sent back to the Ethereum network with an output, as well as verification on the Nillion network that it was performed correctly or verifiably. So then you have those sorts of implications. Then if you have this decentralized meta infrastructure layer, you potentially can create interoperability. My point is that you have arbitrary compute, right? Now, I'm not promising all these things. It depends on who builds up the network. But I will say that we are mostly focused, we have a very evangelizing technology, a phenomenal team, but if I learned something from Reserve and Hedera, it was that we have to focus on and be completely obsessed with the ecosystem. And that's kind of where we are pushing towards now. So everything, the token economics, the founding team, a lot of their compensation is going into is it predicated on them creating companies that get traction off of the network. So this is very different to the way I created the compensation and founding.
It's like building vesting.
Yes, building vesting. Yes, correct. We call it the FE program, the Founding Entrepreneurs Program. I mean, there are several things that I did in inverted commas wrong, or I would have done differently in past that I'm kind of executing on right now, if that makes sense.
Okay. Holy shit, so many questions and a lot to unpack
Sorry.
there. So okay, use cases. You gave some incredible examples. What do you think will be built first on Nillion, if you had to guess?
Cool.
Or where has like a lot of the interest and excitement been in the conversations you've had, and also with the team and the founders building vesting?
I mean, the interest and excitement comes from there. Anyone who actually reviews the white paper in the mathematics, and we have a math white paper coming out very soon. But anyone that actually reviews them will become anyone who understands math or physics, and gets into the core infrastructure will become very enamored. We found that venture funds have hit us up. Like some of the top venture funds in Silicon Valley have hit us up on our cold email. So, info at saying, hey, someone forwarded us the white paper, we read it. This is amazing. The person who due diligence the math for me at the University of London Royal Holloway, she ended up joining the team as well. She's like, oh, this is super cool. So firstly, the technology is attractive. Secondly, the team, there are founders of billion-dollar companies that aren't me that have joined the team as well. Well, I can't really announce. I will announce them within the next probably 2 weeks. All right. But also, I'm trying to avoid a situation where we have a overly hyped token that then pops like ICP upon launch. That is a bad situation for any community. And so I'm happy to do conversations like this with smaller, more specific communities. But the team is getting people excited. The approach, the fact that we've thought about it, and then yes, some of the use cases as well. Now, which use cases will become the most the most used? I'm not 100% sure, but it's like saying, hey, here's the Ethereum network, and here are the use cases that will we couldn't have known that like a decentralized exchange or NFTs were the ones that were going to pop. But I can tell you that in terms of engineering, when you look at a network, the first thing, besides from building the sort of architecture and the initial challenge of translating the math into actual engineering and having the nodes work, in the way that the algorithm suggests that they should. Outside of that, what the first sort of function I believe will need to be is authentication. How do you authenticate with a blockchain? Well, you use your private key, public private key, pure functionality. With the Nillion network, it's a little bit different. You can use your private key or a private key, but you would also want to authenticate with other things. You could say, for example, use your face, or you could use a picture of your identity, or you could use a multi-factor authentication process, or you could, and then you would layer these, right? So, but either way, like, the unlock of that information is something that is very basic to any decentralized network. But it is particularly important with us because it isn't a single factor of authentication, right? And that authentication happens via all of the nodes verifying that that the proposed authentication method is correct. But what that does is it gives us our first use cases as well, right? So one of the ways that we're engendering a user first or a use case first approach is we're saying, what's the first thing we can build? And then what's the first thing that can be built off it, right? So the first thing we need to build, I believe, is going to be, getting access to the network and, authentication. So what are the things that can be built off that? Well, most likely, the decentralized LastPass, a decentralized, Fireblocks, and as I said, so this is the Fort Knox of the metaverse, a decentralized way to have custodian services, which then can expand into other blockchains. So once you have that, you can kind of connect onto other blockchains and then submit, what do you call it, sign transactions onto them. But that is a phase 2, right? So that's why I think the first things that will be built off the network, if we're really thinking about use case first in terms of roadmap, are the Fort Knox of the metaverse use cases. And then after that, you have computation, and then and that's all the sort of enhancing blockchain sort of stuff. And then beyond that, man, there's so much that could occur. Everything from identity, a decentralized global identity network, to biometrics, to medical records, but I don't like to go there. I'd like to win the first things that we can win with engineering, as well as understanding the pathway to get to them. So there are several entrepreneurs now that already want to build these things off the network, because they've done it before. So for example, one of our founding entrepreneurs is part of the founding team, but he's tasked with building off the network. He just sold a company called Seamless Stocks to a private equity house, and it was a government. It was basically DocuSign, but for governments, right? And he's like, look, if you can give me a network that does what you say it does in a GDPR compliant way, I will be able to sell the living crap out of it, because this is exactly what we need, right? That's an example of him using this ability to sign using things, because currently, I don't know about you guys, but my PA signs a lot of my documents, right? It's even easier with DocuSign now. So, this way you can have a biometric authentication that something was signed, and he's like, this is a need, and you've got a GDPR compliant sort of way. And there are several other like weird use cases that have come up as well. Like there is one where a company contacted us that was doing facial recognition, right, for all sorts of purposes, for governments and stores and memberships, etc. And they said the problem is that a lot of people it's not GDPR compliant to store that information on a centralized database in its purest form. In fact, it's not safe, right? So they were like, if you can provide this solution for us where it's basically stored nowhere, but it can be pulled back when the user requests it, or when the user approves of it, then we've got millions and millions of use cases for you guys. But like I said, that's in the far future. I like to think more locally and more crypto community, and get traction. I think that the storage of secrets and private keys and and the basic computation and private storage functions is going to be the first thing, and then after that we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So focusing on winning that first layer, or building the protocol that allows people to then go build other apps on top of it. When do you think that would happen? Like a point where here's everything you guys need, have fun.
I think we're looking probably at about a year and a half, depending on how many engineers that we can hire. PS, if anyone is an engineer and listening to this and wants to work on something cool, hit me up. But it really depends on how aggressively we can hire very talented engineers. If we do a good job, I think the first use cases could start building on the network in probably a year, and then let's say a year to a year and a half, and then in the next year to year and a half would be the more advanced functions, such as cross-chain functionality, decentralized computations, complex decentralized computations, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, cool. You may not know this answer yet, but a thought struck me, and I also see a community member asked this, I believe it was Brad, but energy. How does Nillion fit into the energy narrative? Again, maybe you don't have that math yet, but compared to like proof of stake or proof of work, this adds like more energy consumption, right?
Yeah. Well, energy is a factor of Hedera is very energy efficient because it doesn't utilize proof of work. Generally, things that don't utilize proof of work are a lot more energy efficient. We're not even communicating between nodes where it's client server architecture with a computation that happens on the node and then comes back to the requester or the result, the person who is getting the result, and then that's where the reconstruction happens. So there actually isn't that much of an energy load. I would say it's going to be one of the most energy efficient decentralized networks. Just from like theoretically speaking, there isn't a reason because proof of work isn't used that this should be energy inefficient.
Okay, cool. That's very helpful. We got a few questions from Yuri and a few others about the passing of data that has been tampered with or is not accurate, or there's some error. We were talking about this offline before the call a little bit, but can you explain like what happens if one of the nodes passes data in the reconstruction process that has that has been screwed with in some way? And I think you mentioned like when it's reconstructed, if there's an error more than like a third, something happens, or it prevents errors up to a third. Can you just extrapolate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so the algorithm itself, I mean, for the actual algorithm, we'd have to get Miguel on the line, but what my understanding is that the algorithm itself, it uses a form of error correction. I think it's called verifiable secret sharing or something like that, which tolerates specific faults which tolerates faults. So it's like saying this algorithm allows for X% of answers to be wrong, right? And still can get you the right result, right? And so that percentage will most likely be set at a Byzantine fault tolerant level, i.e. 33%. But you can basically choose that level of error that you can receive from the decentralized nodes while still being able to reconstruct the right result. It's an algorithm.
That's crazy. Yeah. By the way, we're getting a question about where to follow Nillion and join the community. So can you mention how we can do that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a Nillion Telegram channel, but there's also a Nillion Twitter. Honestly, guys, you guys have got this so early that I guess the best way to do it would be to go to nillion.com, subscribe to the email, and then follow on Twitter. We haven't, if you look at our website, we haven't even released our website. That's how early you are. So that's really a function of me being a friend of David for a while. So happy to give you this alpha. I think we've tried to get feedback off a pre-release white paper, which I think you guys might have been sent. That will likely change slightly before we release the official version, depending on feedback that we get. We're really very community oriented, and this is again why we're not doing like a phenomenally huge round with tons of VCs, despite the fact that the big Silicon Valley guys are coming for us. We want to make sure that we involve the community from the ground up. So yes, sign up for the email, Twitter, and I think Telegram and Discord, which are the links of which are on nillion.com.
Yeah, I just want to share my own excitement. Like the team, and I would love to know a little bit more about the team, if you could share it with the group. But it's insane. Like the most A-list team one of the most A-list teams I've ever seen in crypto. And knowing you're sort of anti-VC and you want to build community first. And I also love the idea of being like the reverse ICP in how you launch, like not some big, massively over-marketed, overhyped project, but more like grassroots and building focused, which is exactly what you did with Hedera. Like you guys did almost zero marketing, and just focused on building.
I think the
Uh,
mistake if I was to say with Hedera, the thing that we're not going to do now is that, when the president came on board, who I had a very different opinion with, and who I to this day don't talk to. When he came on board, he raised 100 million at a $6 billion vow, right? And that is not what I would do with this. I want to make sure that that wasn't my decision, guys. that was someone else leveraging the hard work that I had put in to create the community and the momentum. And then what happened there will not happen here. I feel was slightly a betrayal of trust, And so, but all's well that ends well. Like, Hedera is a phenomenal protocol. And so I'm not disappointed about the way it turned out, but I would just, handle things a little differently at this point in time. So, yeah, you're right. I'm not building this team because I want people to be impressed by the team. I'm building it because they are actually really good at what they do, and that's a really important part of this.
can you tell us who they are?
Yeah. So, I can't say the two people who have built unicorns before, right? Because they're still about to sign, right? But if I told you them, they would be on, we would be on TechCrunch, and they're coming on full, like, pretty much one of them's coming on full time. The other one's like taking care of he's got a team basically behind him, right? But the chief scientist is Miguel de Vega. He holds a PhD in mathematics. He's got 30 global patents over the last 22 years. His patents still govern the flow of data packets between transatlantic internet cables to this day. Like, he literally his inventions govern how data flows through the internet, and he's just got like a very blue chip. I mean, he's a cryptography advisor to the Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, which is, the UK's leading defense and security think tank. I mean, the guy's just brilliant. In 2000, the way this happened, the way I met him is in 2017, he got introduced to me by a PhD in machine learning at NYU. And she's like, hey, you gotta talk to this guy. He's absolutely brilliant. So I ended up speaking to him, but he had come up with an evolution of zero knowledge proof, ZKP. And I was like, that's interesting, but a faster Zcash is not going to cut the cheese for me, right? So go back in 2019, he came back to me. So I got this decentralized network that is GDPR compliant. I looked at it, and he's been thinking about identity, blah, blah. I was like, yeah, not really that interesting. Maybe in the long run, yes. But you can't approach identity as a frontal motive. You have to. My research shows me that companies like Unico and the ones in India and in Singapore, which have massive quantities of identities on a on a centralized network, do it because they solve problems not related to identity, but related to fraud prevention or passports. So blah 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 blah. Right. So in 2021, it's like, hey, I got a whole new way of so my point is, through this time, I was sort of honing his thoughts and his invention, and getting it to a point where we came up with basically the technology behind Nillion, and so he's the inventor and chief scientist, and then we've got Alex Page, who's the CEO. He was part of the founding team for Metalink, and then also helped me build the BitClout community. I'm actually the owner of the BitClout Telegram community. If you look up the,
I remember you added me. I was like number 9 in BitClout.
Yeah. And then he's been a co-founder of two B2C companies. And then we've got Rob Leslie, who's the president. He founded several companies, one that went public. He's won a bunch of tech and innovation awards. And he's regularly a speaker at the World Economic Forum. So, that's some of the team. But then we have just hustlers, guys. Like we did a talk at Cambridge, and two of the three interviewers actually ended up joining our team, and two of the listeners did as well, from the computer science faculty. And that's just awesome, right? Like these kids are the smartest kids in the United Kingdom, Cambridge University. And we had a talk last night, and again, like my inbox today was flooded with people who want to join the protocol. So it's not just the people who have done it before; it's the hunger and the culture of obsession and of focus on the ecosystem, on execution, innovation, and the eventual development of the ecosystem that creates this team. Plus, when we add the next 2 or 3 senior people, it's going to be huge.
Man, it's so exciting. I feel like in crypto, there's a lot of projects built by nerds, but their carcasses are kind of left behind because they don't have marketing. Like they don't know how to get the cool thing that they built out into the world, and then someone else does it who has better marketing. And so like you have marketing, but you also, like, this is a very deep tech nerdy project, and you're solving and building something amazing. So I think what everyone's wondering is like, when token? How can, like, what should we do to get exposure to the project? I know we talked about like following socials, but yeah.
So the token, I hope, will be released pretty soon, right? Because I don't want too many people. I don't want this to be an ICP. I want the token to be released, and then people to buy up small, chunks of it, and then at a lower valuation and ride it up. That's how you get communities like Ethereum, like Solana. You get these people who buy tokens and then defend it as it goes up, right? So I want to release it pretty soon. For the seed investors, we're just going to unlock them right away, because the truth is, I would personally, and the other guys who have started billion-dollar projects, would personally buy the tokens at 2 to 3 to probably even 4x what the seed investors are getting in. By the way, the team was not allowed access to the seed because we would have dominated the entire round, right? And so I would encourage you to stay tuned to the project and see when it first launches, and then nibble at it. And this is not investment advice, but if you want to buy some of the token, then nibble at it, as it floats. There's also going to be NFT keys. NFTs. We're thinking about rewarding, because we want to do as much as we can for the community. I don't know if it'll be an access pass or keys or something, but NFTs that are released to the early members of the community, and can't say too much about them, but probably worth getting one of those. And that will ingrain you as part of the community. I haven't really talked about that ever. This is the first time I've actually even said that might be coming. And then there's a learn to earn program that is coming up, and probably competitions that are occurring throughout the time. So my point is, there are going to be ways for the community to start getting, chunks of, I think, tokens for doing specific things, and of course, we are always looking for talented and passionate team members, and people who can help us get to alternative communities that are interested. So, with Hedera, the funny thing is, the community that really got us notoriety was Mike Maloney's Hidden Secrets of Money. It's a gold community, right? But they were really interested in alternative blockchain mechanisms for some reason, right? But any sort of introductions like that, to podcasts, to interesting people, to intellectuals, that all makes a difference. And we're thanking people with token grants, people who can help us with that sort of thing. This is really a Web3 project, so anything that the community can offer is a big deal for us. So I hope that answers your question, with multiple in multiple directions.
It does, yeah. I think one of the things that people in our community feel is overwhelmed with like the vast amount of knowledge and news and things happening in crypto and Web3. There's new NFT launches all the time. There's new DeFi protocols. A new yield, in our case, is offered on Stargate, and you have money on Anchor on Luna, and you want to move it. And so, how like how have you made money in crypto? Because I almost feel like you only do like a couple things per year. Uh, is that true? Like you don't even, and we can maybe this can also tie into what you're bullish on as narratives, or actually we can just even focus on projects and like how you've picked those. But given what's happening in crypto, and there's so much going on now, and I would say in 2015, you really only needed to understand like Bitcoin and Ethereum, and like that was pretty much it. And it was really easy to know everything that was going on in crypto. Now it's literally impossible. So what would you suggest for people who like feel overwhelmed in that way?
So, okay. So for me personally, there are two modes, right? I have degen and I have builder, right? Or let's say degen, trader, builder. And I can't do, they're almost like mutually exclusive in my mind. But before I was, in the interim period of building, Reserve or Hedera, I was a degen. I was like searching for yield, searching for things to invest in, aping into ridiculous projects, NFTs, whatnot, right? And what I find is that informs you about how to think about crypto. It allows you to be, as Bain says, born in the dark, right? And it gives you that like sense of what product might actually work for something, to something to build. There's no way I could know that Nillion will be successful or have a sense of it without having that pulse of crypto, right? And I think you would be the same, David. Like, you guys created yield farming. You knew you did it yourself first. You understood it, and then you understood what the market needed, right? So you went from degen mode to building mode, and I think that's a main, a really important thing to note. But to your question of what what you would do as someone who is looking at all these options and alternatives, is honestly focus on the thing that gives you the most return, but also the thing that makes you the happiest to focus on. So, for me, it's not really most of it for me is in finding early stage projects and tokens and investing in them, or taking them, or helping them build. Now that happens very, very rarely, but I would rather just invest. But that's something that I think provides a lot of value for me. I think as I become more and more, in inverted commas, post-economic or successful, I start to do that less, and I start to look for things which could be very, very cool to get involved in, right? So I think there's been a progression for me from, looking at a lot of things and then narrowing down to the things that made me the most return, and then becoming kind of successful there, and then narrowing down again to the things which are slightly more committed. But so I'm not jumping from project to project. I'm kind of focusing on one, but that takes a lot of time. I call that process waiting. So while I'm degenning and deploying, I'm kind of waiting for something that I can kind of push into as as a more focused effort, right? Similar to, I guess, what you did. I know you looked at a lot of things, figured out how to yield farm, and then really narrow it down into creating something around that niche and use case. And then, eventually building out, now I'm at a point where I'm mostly focused on, bigger ideas and that sort of thing, because I can take that sort of concept level risk, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's an incredible insight. It's almost like you're collecting as much information. You go through a phase of collecting as much information as possible, and filtering that down to something that really excites you, or it allows you the knowledge to then look at opportunities that seem really exciting based on this new knowledge that you've built up, and then you can go focus all your brain juice into that one thing
Yes.
because you have
Yes.
built up all that knowledge.
Yes.
And
Now
what's
that's,
cool about
sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I mean, I think what's really cool about you is that part of your information gathering phase is that you surround yourself. Not only do you do it yourself, but you also surround yourself with these contrarian, weird people in your own words, who feed you information beyond what you're doing yourself. So you can't do everything, but you'll also open up.
100%. That's
You
so
open up
important.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so important that the people that send me ideas and send me stuff. I mean, the problem is I have so much of it coming in that it's almost overwhelming. As you know, like I forget half the shit people send me because it's just got so much, right? And I do, and so it's hard for me to get, and it's actually the reason I don't do many of these talks, because the noise starts to become fucking overwhelming, so I tend to, one thing I will say that I wanted to caveat that on is that I have friends who are extremely successful as well, who are traders, and they focus on identifying contrarian trades or identifying really sort of high alpha trades. And those guys get really obsessed with a specific idea, and then they go through with it. And I love those guys. Like, I respect that modality of operation so deeply, because they get really obsessed and then they convince themselves of a contrarian narrative, and then they kind of execute. And the ones who are sort of who really understand it and who get it, it's a different model for them. So you don't always have to go and build something. You can trade your way through something. I don't know, Dave, like you're the one who I would have to ask if there are people who yield from their way to extraordinary riches. There probably are. But, for me, I've seen the traders and the builders create just huge chunks of wealth. But a very common theme is that, they do find the truffle, or are contrarian, or just different from the consensus or the herd.
Yeah. Understanding current meta and narratives, super important. And I think that's what we're talking about now, is just getting as deeply involved as you can, collecting information, surrounding yourself with people who are doing the same thing, ideally contrarian, where they're in areas outside of what you're an expert in. And all that feeds into your brain to help you direct what thing you're going to take directional exposure on, whether it's Luna or Matic before Luna, or some new narrative now like Stargate, which is part of like the multi-chain, cross-chain narrative. So speaking of narratives, what excites you the most for 2022? We could even do short-term or long-term.
Let me think. That's I think that because I'm currently in a building phase, I haven't scoured I'm not in smelling truffles right now, right? I'm in build, and so it's a different skill set for me. So my answers may not be completely accurate, but I do see a lot of momentum in longevity and biotechnology. I do see them obviously, I believe in the evolution of decentralized technology via computations, etc. I feel like social tokens and a Web3 social network is going to express itself in some way. I just don't know how, right? It was like in 2017, I was like, man, these NFTs, they're fucking the shit. This is going to be great. I just didn't know how. I remember saying to one of the key people in NFTs back then, I was like, this is going to be so huge. The problem is, I just don't know when it's going to be, right? And so I'm not willing to build on this. This is when I was the highest bidder in the first ever live auction of NFTs, and I was like, this is going to be massive, right? But the problem is, I was like, I don't think I want to build for this, because it's going to take several years. It could take a decade for this to get to where it's at. Same thing with social tokens. Don't know when, think it's going to happen, right? And I don't know the exact way to make that bet. And then, I still think NFTs are going to be huge. One-of-one NFTs or NFTs with increasing utility or bespoke utility. So for example, there are NFTs which have inbuilt oracleized functions. So you can have an NFT that reflects, just as an example, like the growth of a rainforest or something like that, right? Or NFTs that reflect the weather in London or something like that. Like the things that are possible with decentralized, it's just super, super cool. So yeah. If you had come to me before, I would have had more interesting things to talk about. But those, I think, are the narratives that excite me. I'm happy to also tell you sort of things I'm not so much aping into, but sort of excited about as a result of those narratives. So contrarian ways of thinking. I mean, I do like Zcash, all right, because I just think that privacy coins haven't had their day in the sun yet. And there is good reason for that sometimes, but not many people are talking about them, but they haven't, of all the currencies that hit their all-time high past 2017, privacy coins never did that, right? So I think that there is probably some narrative potentiality there. And then I like the concept of food inflation. This is what my truffle pig told me. So, I've been in NYSE MOS, so Mosaic, for a while now. And, I bought it at like $20 at 60. I think it's going to go higher to 100. But again, not financial advice. This is just stuff that I'm putting money into. So,
What is food inflation? What do you mean?
Food inflation is basically, the way that supply and demand of the commoditized parts of the food chain becomes more expensive because of several factors, thus leading to increased food prices, where a company like Mosaic would experience a increase in share price. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. By the way, changing gears here, I think we just got a really good question from Scott. By the way, are you able to see the chat on your side?
Oh, me?
There may be a way to click chat or on the bottom of your screen to see it, but I'll read it to you anyway. I'm going to read it out loud. Obtaining consensus more quickly, more efficiently, and more securely seems like a no-brainer for a successful project. Are you concerned that taking around a year to get to market will allow others to jump to the front of the line and establish themselves first? Any whispers or rumors on similar projects? And I'm going to add a third question, which is high level. I hear this all the time in people messaging me saying, hey, I have this idea. Like, can we sign an NDA, or I'm scared of other people stealing it. I know how I respond to those, but for people who are concerned about someone stealing their idea, how do you handle that question? Because I'm sure you get a lot of those.
Well, sometimes there's a good reason to sign an NDA because of regulatory concerns. But typically speaking, if it's a good idea, several people are going to have it. I was talking to Devin, and he was like, "Man, there were a bunch of NFT marketplaces, and we were the one that just kept going through the winter, right?" So I'm not concerned, because there is a frontier of technology, and a lot of people are pushing on that frontier, and it will not just be and I think first mover advantage is important, but so is differentiation. And first mover advantage isn't like who launches first; it's also who gets the zeitgeist, who captures the market. And we just have a phenomenal go-to-market team and a go-to-market strategy. And my entire focus is ecosystem. So I don't really care if we launch. I don't know. I see competitors within the decentralized like cross-chain protocol sort of thing. None of them have great marketing and none of them have great product market fit right now, but they might, like, you know, guys like Layer Zero or Synapse, etc. But we're not really playing in that game. We don't have to win that game. If any of the use cases, if we win that game, that's great, right? But if any of the use cases that I expounded on in this talk actually eventuate, this thing will be a deca-billion-dollar protocol, right? It just takes one. And if one of them propagates, then the nature of the protocol whereby the information that is kept on the network starts to compound and starts to build, means that there's less friction for the other use cases. So, you know, if you do use it for authentication of some way, shape, or form, or you do use it to, you know, store your passwords, or you do use it for some sort of identity thing, or you do use it for you know, KYC, AML, that information becomes very valuable for all other use cases, including the decentralized, you know, cross-chain solutions and you know, decentralized DEX, et cetera, et cetera. Does that make sense? So I'm not overly concerned because I don't see that many people pushing towards this. Firstly, it's very technically difficult to have created a permissionless, decentralized network that performs with the same security guarantees as an SMPC network. That is freaking hard, right? I think we are the first to do it, or one of the first to do it. There are people who are trying to do it via a permission network, but again, it's skating to where the puck's going. Those people also have assessed their teams. They're, you know, A, the technology is inferior. B, it's sort of permission, and C, it's just an inferior team and go to market, right? So no, I'm not afraid of competition. You know, I expect there to hopefully be competition if you know, as we live in a competitive world where we're all chasing the frontier of technology. But you know, there's nothing we can do to like rush that process except hire more engineers. And like I said, even if we did hire the engineers, you got to translate the mathematics into engineering. The thing is, we'll be able to express interest in this via a token and integrate that token into the security of the protocol, you know, before the network itself goes live. And that isn't rare, right? You can do that. So
yeah, great answer. Okay, we have another. I'm just reading questions, by the way. So we have.
Do you want me to, I can see them now. So
okay.
Do you want me to,
I'll probably pick them since you're
okay.
busy thinking and speaking. So by the way, anyone else who has questions, now is a great time to post them. And I'll pick the best one. So John's asking, how do you make yourself indispensable at some point? Because you've launched so many of these, and they've all been massive home runs. And now you're involved in multiple projects, and they're all individually massive, potentially world-changing projects. So do you do like 0 to 1 and then you replace yourself? Is that how you've set these up in the past?
You know, in the past, it was forced upon me. So with Hedera, I just had a disagreement with the president, right? And I kind of got ousted, you know, but you know, I'm still, you know, it's still my founding team, and you know, I still have a lot of love for Hedera as a protocol, etc.
And you're probably your biggest bag.
It is my biggest bag as well. Always one of my biggest bags. And so, you know, well, you know, so what I started to realize from Hedera was I am built in a way that I can create 0 to 1, right? And I did it for Hedera, I did it for Reserve, and it's just the experience that I have is very unique and special. And so I could go through, you know, how I kind of do it, but you know, our mutual friend Andrew Yo, he says, dude, there's just a magic that you are able to do within, you know, I've never seen anything like that before. And it is true, like there is just something that is just about the way I am that allows me to do that. Now, I don't always replace myself. I got replaced in Hedera, and then I realized that, man, once the company raises $100 million, or once a company has passed a specific threshold, it gets this momentum on its own. Not that I want to be replaced, but I become less and less relevant, you know. And I have no ego to want to want to be the visual leader of a company, right? So so my thing is, but then again, like RSR has really, you know, several times in the past, Nevin has called me and said, hey, I really need your help on this. And I've just jumped in, you know, fully again to kind of help out. It's like these are companies that once I have created an exponential effect, and that takes a lot of time. Like I've been you think about it, like, oh, build it, and man, I've been talking to Miguel since 2017. We've spent countless hours discussing the technology. You know, this has been 4 years up to this point. So what people see here is like this flash in the pan of it. It's not like that, right? Like, you know, there's a lot of energy and effort that goes into this. Hedera was less of of that sort of thing, but you know, Nillion definitely was, you know, was more like that. So I know where I'm very good. I like to stay involved longer term with the projects, but I do understand that there are people who are very, very good and probably better than me at taking things from 1 to 10. And I don't have the ego to want to do that, or rather I want to do it, right? And I'm going to be staying involved in these companies, but I also know that there are some really fucking great killers out there, you know? And so I'm happy as well to be like, you're better than me, you know, and be like, yeah. And the other thing is like, the skill set you need for 0 to 1 is kind of a little bit more cowboyish, right? It's, you think fast, you break things, you move fast, you break things. But as a company matures, you got to be a lot more careful. Like Hedera couldn't have, to get the council on board, they had to rein in the marketing a little bit, I think, you know. So, and that was like reining me in, you know. So, you know, so yeah, hope that answers the question.
Yeah. A great answer, man. I really like this question from Tyler. He's asking, what is the best advice you've ever received? Like, what's the first golden nugget that pops up in your brain as I ask that question?
It depends on which period of my life.
How about in the last 5 years?
In the last 5 years. Oh, yeah, I know what it is. Okay. This is a practical piece of advice. All right. So I have like various philosophical pieces of advice, right? Like, one that strikes me is like that you are the judge. You are the judge of the time of what you do with your time. Like you shouldn't, you know, in the end, if you get rich, if you get, if you go party, if you, you should be the only judge. It's literally a fair playing field, right? But that's like philosophical. The best practical advice I've received is, man, this is crazy, but there's a little hack in Audible, okay, the app. And a mentor said to me, probably it wasn't 5 years ago, it was slightly more, but he goes, hey, you can add multiple people onto an Audible account to share an Audible account, A, right? And then B, what you should be doing is just keeping in like your headphones, right? In your ear, when you're walking, when you're showering, when you're shitting, when you're like doing, going to the gym, etc. Even when you're getting a massage, just keep it in there. It's not important that you absorb everything, right? But he said to me, the effect of just playing audio books that you or your friends or high level people enjoy, the effect of that over 1 year will be more wisdom. The effect of that, 1 year will be not much. 2 years will be more wisdom. 3 years will be a different education. And over the 4th and 5th years, you will have lived in another life. So I could not agree with that more. What I'm expressing to you now is a small pill of the things that I've learned over time through experience, etc. And it's not even a well-filtered pill. But, I keep listening to audiobooks, listening to things with my downtime. And what is important is realizing the compound effect that has. All these thoughts and ideas all percolating through my subconscious that somehow just made me a lot smarter, right? And these answers that came to me and these concepts that I adopted that optimized my life in such a way that I was able to accomplish the things that I've accomplished have occurred because of the way I think, right? I'm no different to everyone. I'm like 5'8", Asian dude. And yes, I probably have like a base level of raw intelligence. I mean, my IQ is like 100. Last time I checked it, like 130 or something. It's not like super high, right? But the compound effect of this optimization of time and thinking has really led to like outsized outcomes. So it's that, plus it's the fact that I can invite as many devices as I want into an Audible account. So as Dave, all my smart friends, hey, come into my Audible account, and then let's just buy books. And when you buy a book, put your credit card on, buy a book, and then we all share the same thing. So I'm constantly getting updates on books that are added to the account of smart people, and I've got like probably 1,000 books in that account now, where I haven't read half of them. That's fine. Half of them I played and they were shitty. That's fine as well. And half of them I didn't absorb, but the ones that I did, even if it was 20%, it compounds into like the full utilization of the most potent part of a human being, which is your mind, your thinking. It's a primary tool or weaponry of a human being, and thus honing it via via earpods and an iPhone and Audible and or podcasts or whatever is extraordinary, especially when all you're doing is using downtime.
I'm first of all extremely hurt that I'm not added to your Audible account yet. So after this call, you got to add me. Yeah. It sounds awesome. So you mentioned this compounding effect of the things that are happening in your conscious brain that perhaps then get processed by your subconscious brain. And this reminds me of that famous quote from Naval, where he says, play long-term games with long-term people. And because there's this compounding effect on relationships by doing that. I'm just curious. I know we talked about this briefly earlier, but like this seems like something you're so good at, both in people, but also like in health, and clearly the acquisition of knowledge. So like, I think this is actually your biggest North Star is, and in fact, like your network, and I've met a lot of the people in your network and your friends, and everyone kind of calls you like the truffle pig, or that you have this like truffle pig farm, and you've surrounded yourself with people who are truffle pigs themselves, and they just go and find truffles and like bring them back to you in some way. And you also are also a truffle pig, and you give value to others in your network. I'm just curious if you could like talk about that and like what other areas of life that North Star has added value to, and also like how to do it. Like, how do you find these people?
So I'm not going to say that this is the ideal way to live, to surround yourself with truffle pigs. It does create certain outcomes, but if you're optimizing towards things like happiness, then sometimes like, being around people who make you feel good, or, so for example, I have a friend of mine, he's a fucking great guy. I meet a lot of girls around him, etc. He's just not like very bright, right? He's not a truffle pig, except, but I like him in my life. It's not all about finding truffle pigs. It's about the optimization of your life. But I do have truffle pigs around me, right? And I do like to keep them around me because I respect their intelligence. I respect, and so, and I personally, I think I'm somewhat of a truffle finder. How I find them, how I attract them, is a uncompromising desire for truth and for results. Okay. Sometimes I don't even know how the result happens. Like before the Nash equilibrium was invented, people were still acting by way of the Nash equilibrium. It's just the optimal way to act. There are forces at play out there which we don't know, which, we're a smart species. We're not like, necessarily, we don't know everything that's happening to us, right? We can't predict the future. And so when you think about it in that way, the end result is that I think I focus on just the result, right? Like, so has this person, is it a guy I know, for example, so there's a guy I know who's very smart, he kind of is crazy, and he came up with the calls for Mosaic and Zcash and Chainlink. And then there's the guy I know, and there's the guy I know who is not smart, who's just a fucking like big teddy bear, who every time he gives me something, like I'm wearing an Aura ring right now, he's like, hey, I got this thing, it's a seed round, this like ring, I'm in the seed round of Aura ring, right? I'm like, how did that happen? Then he got me into like several cannabis deals, which were like 100x. I mean, I don't know how that happens. I don't know how this one guy who's just ultra smart and this other guy, they're both like, they're both truffle pigs in a way, but I don't understand, like, I do tend to look for people who are intelligent, but I don't use that as my North Star. I use this as my North Star result, right? Can this, and not just result for that person, result for the people around him. I know a lot of the people, for example, that you go out with them and, they get girls and you don't. That is, or they get rich and you don't. Bad result. Bad result.
I think what your, I think a way that you manifest this is you're obsessed with giving value to others. And I think if we have like 5 minutes left here, but one of the things I'm kind of reading between the lines and what I've also felt in our relationship is like, you're like obsessed with giving value to others. And then people are therefore obsessed with giving value back to you. And then like, you don't even do it in a way where like you expect anything in return. It's just who you are. But you are obviously, you are careful about who you allow into your circle. But for those select few, whether it's family or a friend with a health issue, or someone like me, you just like, you're constantly giving value back.
Yeah, well, if I can give value, yeah, you're right. Actually, like there are times where I meet someone, like I met Nick Candy the other day, and I was like, man, I can't give any value to this guy. I just didn't form a relationship, right? Like, he built one Hyde Park in London. It's just different environment. I basically was like, look, if I can be a crypto resource for you, great. If I can't, you can maybe invest a little bit in some of my companies, but I don't really have anything that can create a large amount of value for you, and that's fine, right? But where I can, I try and deliver not just value, but scalable value. So it doesn't take much of my time. It's not like I'm giving several hours of my day to deliver a piece of value. I'm like, this introduction will help, or this. What does this person need? And sometimes I get to a point in a conversation, I'm like, man, I don't know how. But the question I ask is, so how can I help you? Like, I've actually been doing that more and more these days. I'm like, what do you need? Like, how can I help you? Who do you need to be introduced to? What do you need to know? What's the thing that's going on in your life, which is creating the most pain or the most suffering, and allow me to help you to do that, and it doesn't matter if I do that for a bad person, it takes like a minute of my time or 5 minutes of my time. It's totally fine. Maybe they're just on their journey and they haven't figured out how to be a good person yet or something. I don't really quite mind, adding adding value. But you are right. Like that's how I find adding value. And as I said before, focusing on the results around people. When I hang around people, do I win? Yes. Continue. Do I not win? Then, you know, diminish the amount of time I spend with them, but still keep adding a ton of value. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome. Okay, dude, we got 3 minutes left. By the way, everyone who's on this call, we're still doing a Q&A for yield farming. So we're going all day here. So there's a link I posted earlier that's in the Circle community. Andrew, any last words of wisdom or thoughts you want to share? Obviously, I think we should talk about Nillion again for anyone who just joined. Check out we have tons of posts on how to get involved in Nillion. There's almost no one on the planet who even knows about Nillion yet, despite some of the most successful entrepreneurs in the world being involved with this. So I'm going to post the links now.
Yeah, we're still hiring. So, you know, man, anyone who joined the team at this point in time for Hedera or Reserve just made so much, like, insane amounts of money. So, you know, I think this might be the same thing. Maybe not. Can't guarantee it. But, you know, looking very good.
Yeah.
And you want final thoughts? Is that what you?
Yeah.
In what space you want to be more specific? We've really covered a lot in this.
We did. Yeah. I would say, honestly, I mean, like the stuff that we covered is good enough. What we can do is just close out. And by the way, like, I don't know if you haven't seen the chat, but like, everyone loves you. This has been amazing. Like, I think you've changed a lot of lives just by hopping on this call, and we're going to share the recording with a lot of others, and it's going to be posted online. So a lot of people are in our community are going to see this who weren't able to attend. Nillion sounds really, really cool, and can't wait to keep following along. Again,
I would say one thing, closing thought. I would say most people have the assessment of risk wrong, right? The risk of what they do with their lives, etc. So, you know, you join, you know, looking at, like, you know, if you're a part of this program, you're probably doing reasonably well, right? Then, you know, you can afford to take more risk, right? And don't be afraid to take that, like, jump, especially if you find something. You know, I talk to lawyers all the time, like, man, you work 2 years in a law firm, or you get a great degree, you will never, ever be starved for a job. You can take as much risk as you want right now, right? And so, you know, the downside isn't that bad, right? Especially in first world countries, which I'm assuming a lot of these people are, you know, and the upside isn't just financial, it's a better story for your life, you know. And I think in the end, like I said, you are the single most important arbiter of truth of the way you spend your time. And if you do it in such a way that is, you know, inspiring for the risks that you take, or, you know, that where you took the risks that you want to take, then I think that's a life well spent. So, you know, that would be my parting thought.
I agree. As you know, I take on a lot of risk, and I think if you have a good fiat collection job, or you're in general good at collecting fiat, like launching businesses or whatnot, then you can definitely take on most likely more risk than you have, and especially if you're young. There's actually some interesting math that I included. Andrew, you're not aware of this, but in the university, on comparing like two individuals, one that takes on a little bit more risk on a yearly basis than the other, where the basket of risk that they've taken can have outsized returns compared to like the low risk basket. And even if it's just like a 5 to 10% allocation of their time or their resources, like that person massively outperforms by orders of magnitude the person who took literally zero risk.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
By the way, I'm not telling everyone to like go ape into the nearest shitcoin. Don't do that. I was talking about time and the things that you're doing with your life, you know. So yeah.
Yep. Okay, cool. Thank you, everyone. We're gonna see you in the Q&A. Andrew, this was a pleasure. And I think we're hanging out. We're like going on a safari soon. So we have to talk about
Yes,
that
yes,
later.
yes. Safari and hopefully much more. I've been talking to our mutual friend about some other things, maybe the Caribbean or something. We'll see.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
All right, guys.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you. See you.
All
Bye.
right. Bye.